Hi everybody, good evening. My name is Alan, and on behalf of the crew I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Bridging Heaven and Earth. You know, it's interesting how, all of us, everyone who has a human body, everybody who walks on this earth, every human being for sure, has those ups and downs in their lives. I mean, today's an interesting day. We're shooting, this is our 101st show. We're shooting it June 9th, 2000. And today is my father's birthday. And he is obviously over 50. I mean, he doesn't want me to reveal his age, but he's obviously over 50. And it's just a joyous occasion for him and for all of us that he's around to share his love and his wisdom and his grace with us for another year. And then at the same time, my darling sister-in-law today is determining when she's going to start a chemotherapy session to deal with a cancer situation that she's dealing with. So in the same day, you have the joy of the celebration of the birthday and the dilemma, say, or the concern of a cancer treatment, of a chemotherapy, of how that's going to affect things. And for all of us, we have those things in our lives, those dualities, those goods and bads, those right and wrongs, those necessary things that happen. And yet we need to connect to something deeper. We need to connect to something that is truly beyond that, truly our true love, our true nature. And that is what this show, Bridging Heaven and Earth, is about, for us to bridge heaven and earth. And with all the situations, with all the highs and lows, with all the dilemmas, with all the good things that happen and the seeming bad things, there is an experience that we can have of true love, of true dedication, of true devotion, of true connectedness to the infinite love, to what we call God here on earth. And not that there's one God for you and one God for me and one God for the other. For the blacks, for the whites, for the youngs and the olds. We talk about that all the time here. It's that true love, that true connection, where we're all one family, where we're all one love. So tonight we have guests with us again whose life is dedicated to that search, for that experience, to bring us all, themselves and all of us, more and more into that experience of the one love, of that true connection, where whatever is happening, the good and the bad, we're still feeling connected. We're not feeling separate from that infinite. And in that, we can overcome whatever we need to overcome in this life. We can deal with whatever tests we have, whatever crosses we have to bear, and we can do it with grace and dignity and love. We have Robert Wilkinson with us tonight, who's travels the world as an astrologer and a futurist. He's author of 3 books. His latest is a new look at Mercury Retrograde, which is being talked about quite a bit. What does it mean to be in Mercury Retrograde? What do all the grand crosses and all those things mean of the stars and the heavens, and how do they affect us here on earth? And we're going to talk to him about it. Then we have somebody who was on with us, I think last season and the season before, Lessia, who's a world-renowned singer-songwriter. And if if you've watched the last few shows, she and I worked on a CD together called Lessia, Bridging Heaven and Earth. And that CD is going to be coming out very soon, or when you're watching it, it's probably out already. And she has 4 other CDs out, and she's going to sing 3 songs tonight from that album. That all 3 of those songs she and I wrote together. So again, whatever situations you've been dealing with in your life, now's an hour that we can all connect deeper, that we can all connect to a stronger sense of that love, of that connectedness, of that divineness that we all are. So please join me as we normally do at this time for a short meditation, and then we'll begin tonight's show with Lessia singing All the Same Love. So please join me. Thank you. So please settle in. There's really an extraordinary show here. There's a lot to hear, there's a lot to see, there's a lot to experience. So Lessia's first set, she's going to do the song All the Same Love This is a song that Lessia and I wrote together, and Lessia is going to perform it. It's the lead song on the new album, Lessia Bridging Heaven and Earth. Wow, that was fantastic. Wow, thank you, Lessia. That was wonderful. Yeah, she can sing that song that we wrote together. So I'm on the set with Robert. Welcome.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Isn't that a beautiful song?
Great
Yeah.
collaborative project.
Yeah.
Truly in the spirit of what is presenting itself to the entire race right now, truly. We've now hit a point in history where the larger configurations clearly indicate that this is the moment of collective return. We're breaking free of an old inertia that has been with us for 2,500 years. And it's truly the collaboration within the oneness that we all are together that is going to be the way that this new era manifests. Without a doubt, it's happening in everybody's life that I know of that is on any kind of a path to truth or truth-seeking whatsoever. So this is a perfect example of the larger collective impulse that is spreading across the entire world.
Well, Lessia, we got ourselves a new press agent. We're cool now, so everything's good. So why don't you explain to people, we like to start off as if people had never heard of any of the stuff we talk about. Why don't you just give a little bit of a background, what astrology is and how it leads you to experience the oneness and the truth and, you know, a little bit an opening for people.
Well, as I put it, astrology is a little bit like a weather report and a roadmap. It kind of shows you the general tides and the general trends as well as your specific tides and specific trends within that. Now, astrology is not deterministic in that sense, in that I have found that there's only two things fated in this entire world. One was to be born when you were, where you were, to the folks you were, and the other is the timing on certain choices. Not what choice you will make, but when you will have to make those choices. And in the choices we make, we determine our character, and that determines our destiny. And so people say, well, but you know, how come one Taurus is not like another Taurus? And I try to explain it that...
But astrology is where the planets were when you were born, you know, things like that.
Exactly.
Why don't you even go back a step further?
Astrology basically shows us the vintage of our existence. It shows us our soul potential within the three-dimensional world that soul incarnates into. So the timing of your first breath sets into all of your cycles into motion. You've got material and physical cycles. You've got emotional cycles. You've got mental cycles. And you've got spiritual cycles. And these, of course, work on a personal level, on an interpersonal or social level, and then on a larger archetypal level. Astrology indicates all of these cycles of our lives. What are our predisposing tendencies? What are our challenges? What are our strengths? What are our blind spots? And when are we going to be confronted at certain crucial moments in our life?
And that's based on where all the planets are and where the stars are at that moment of first breath.
Exactly. Now, one of the big misconceptions of astrology is that people think that the planets make something happen. In fact, it's more like an analogy of the pattern of the sky has parallels to our internal patterns. And our internal psychological patterns are, in fact, what express themselves into the real world that creates our life experiences, so to speak. So astrology shows us our wholeness and our fragmentedness. It shows us how we are similar and in resonant harmony with others, including parts of our own world. It also shows us when we are most likely to come into challenging situations or interact with challenging people, or when it's time to shift out of one direction into another direction, out of one series of interpretations into another series of interpretations. Astrology can help us understand why things happen the way they do, because it shows us the factors going on inside of us and in our external world, and therefore shows us how we can best play circumstances and situations given our strengths, given our weaknesses. So astrology is truly an ancient art and science. Every culture has had their astrology. The fact that the Chinese say that there is the year of the ox or the year of the horse is not that much different than saying that this person is a Taurus or this person is a Sagittarius, for example. It's all just the language and the symbols used. Every culture has had its way of symbolizing its reality, and you might say where our inherent emphases are when we are born within that greater reality. Astrology is a phenomenal tool. It's the one thing that I keep coming back to over and over again as showing, you might say, larger forces at work that, shall we say, show us how we can best respond to the moment, whether or not this person is really a suitable relationship for us, whether or not we should go into this profession or that profession. For example, there's a whole branch of astrology that's medical astrology. By the onset of a disease, one can know the factors and the timing of the development of that disease, whether it is chronic, whether you were born with it, whether it's a product of your progressed existence, or whether or not it's something that you're going to have to manage for the rest of your life. And of course, in this country, medical astrology is forbidden because of the AMA. But for example, in England, in many of the former British colonies, in India, astrology is extraordinarily well respected as an art and a craft and a science. And astrologers are actually elevated in those societies far beyond the way we're regarded here in America. So, in that sense, a lot of astrology is taken to be so much fortune-telling. And it's really not fortune-telling. For example, a person might come to me and say, well, will I get divorced? I will never say that, whether they will or won't, because ultimately that's free will. But I can say that either their relational issues are challenging, or their relational issues need to take on a certain aspect of learning, or that perhaps a certain way of relating is more appropriate to now than it was 6 months ago or a year ago, or will be 6 months or a year from now. So astrology really helps us understand both the larger factors at play, as well as our unique and individual abilities within that larger play. So I find it universally useful. Of course, astrology works on all levels. I mean, I used to do a lot of predictive astrology, where I could tell somebody, for example, when to go to Las Vegas or who was going to win the Super Bowl. I found I was very accurate, but that's a little bit, the fortune-telling aspect of it is truly the coarsest and most dense aspect of that art and science. What really I see as the ultimate benefit to astrology is that personally I believe that we have a body, we have our feelings, and we have our mind, but we are a consciousness who is learning to manage our body instincts, our feeling patterns, our mental habits. And we bring all of these as a function of time, you might say, into an integrated form under the wisdom of the higher self, that we may bring forth the truth and the love of the soul. And that's truly the best that our astrology can show us. A lot of people think that the bad aspects mean something bad is going to happen. Simply put, the challenging aspects in astrology deal with the necessity to find the right action. The harmonious aspects of astrology represent the challenge to find an understanding. And truly life is worked out through our understanding and our actions in the interactive gestalt of our existence.
Right, and the first book you wrote was actually Astrology and Spirituality, how there's not that separation that people
right,
see.
There is no separation.
I mean, the true astrology is about the connection to God, the connection to the One, our place in that, rather than the Vegas 21 gambling casino.
Well, exactly. We come in with a special purpose to fulfill. I believe every one of us has a purpose to fulfill. Every one of us has a gift to offer. In our charts, we can see our strengths. We can see our weaknesses. We can see the antidotes to those weaknesses. We can understand that we are predisposed towards certain things, some of which are good, some of which might not be so good. And we can also see when we are apt to be presented with crucial challenges to change the pattern from non-productive to productive, from difficult to fulfilling, from disharmonious to harmonious. It doesn't replace, shall we say, real-world common sense. For example, like there's this whole branch of astrology, of planting by the stars, and I've had enormous success with that. But at the same time, for example, you can find the best day of the moon in December, and if you're trying to plant something like potatoes, it's not going to grow in December. So even if you get the best day on Earth astrologically, it cannot counteract the so-called real-world conditions. However, it can show us the timing when, if we act appropriately, feel appropriately, think or gather information appropriately, then we can bring the disharmonious parts of our lives into a smoother function with each other. And it is possible, for example, to use astrology to benefit one's life. I was asked by somebody, they said, well, you should give an example. One time, not very long ago, I helped a client of mine save over $250,000 on the purchase price of a house. He went in to bid on this house, and he had me erect a chart on whether or not to buy this house. And it looked like it was his house to buy, but it would take long, roundabout negotiations. He had to not give up nor give in, and that it was his, but that it would not fall to him for a period of 5 to 7 months. Mm-hmm. And I could see that from his chart. That it was his house, but it wouldn't come to him. Well, he thought he had lost it a couple of times, that every time the guy came back with a lower bid. Eventually, it came in at $250,000 lower than the initial price. Okay, so you can see that. There are other ways, of course, that one can use astrology to what might be called personal advantage. But truly, the best advantage one can have is to bring forth one's soulful function. As you might say, the magic of existence, the magic that we are, the magic of, you might say, a mind, a body, and a heart, all unified in the one direction of one's true gift and wisdom. And that's the blessing that astrology brings. That leads me sort of into the book, that the thing, why I wrote about Mercury Retrograde in terms of this particular book, is that Mercury is one of the most misunderstood of planets. It is the internal function of our existence that coordinates our mind, our body, and our soul. And it is the coordinating principle between our inner world of being and our outer world of doing. And Mercury, of course, goes retrograde. In other words, it appears to go backwards in motion 3 times a year, 3 weeks at a time, forever. And we've all heard the jokes on the sitcoms about Mercury retrograde, and they make jokes about it in the movies. It's probably one of the single most misunderstood things about astrology. And the book is really dedicated to explaining the positive aspects of Mercury retrograde, the positive skills and talents and gifts of Mercury retrograde people, how they do actually learn a whole different way than other people. And for example, we tend to believe that a lot of learning has to do with instruction. But in fact, there's other whole ways to learn, for example, like mentoring, where you're not laying a bunch of instructions on a person, but instead it's more learning by example, learning by practice and rehearsal before the actual doing of things. This is what a Mercury retrograde period is fantastic for. And I make a joke, it's the world's largest book on the world's smallest subject, because nobody could possibly believe that I could have gotten 200 pages of material about Mercury retrograde. But some interesting thing happened during Mercury retrograde. And Mercury, being the magic of one's existence, truly mythologically, Mercury was considered to be the guide of souls. Okay? And if you consider that the mercurial part of us guides us to our soul, and it's also the symbol of the divine magician. As I put in the book, perhaps Mercury retrograde periods are the time when we can catch a glimpse of how the divine magician works, both in the world and in our lives, so that we can bring forth a more authentic, soulful way of living. And so that book is actually dedicated to showing people how they can capture the magic in their lives, the magic of Mercury and its retrograde periods, and understand how they can best move toward a soulful way of being during these periods.
And it obviously will help them maintain a soulful existence after these periods. You don't want to just be soulful twice a year for 3 weeks.
Well,
although...
No, but I would think that if one could be fully in one's soul, even for 9 weeks a year,
I would say that would
it would be a good start. Yes,
I would
yes.
say it would be a very good start.
Yeah, and there's a lot of superstitions about astrology out there, that this makes this happen, or that makes this happen, or this is the reason why this is bad, or this is good. And it's not quite so mechanistic and deterministic. And the era that we enter into right now, which is really the most dynamic era literally in 2,500 years. It's a great and vast flowering of a collective, unified wisdom experience.
And this is shown in the stars by certain alignments, like the Great Grand Cross has just happened.
Exactly.
Why don't you explain that a little? Because I know people have heard it.
Well, there are great configurations that go on. For example, a lot of people were very excited and upset about last summer's great eclipses and grand crosses, and then they promptly forgot about them.
And that means that certain stars and certain planets align a certain way,
A
that
certain
from
way.
Earth it looks like a cross or a star.
Yeah, literally, if you could look at it on a four-dimensional plane, you would see a cross between four different stars. Mm-hmm. What has happened is we've entered a particularly dynamic period of change collectively. And it is our job, you might say, to respond individually the best we're able to the collective changes that are being presented upon us. Mostly, I am extremely optimistic based on what I'm seeing in terms of the long wave of human evolution. We are truly collectively and individually on a path of return. And that most of what is being shattered or challenged right now is actually moving us into a different harmonic, a whole different set of potential frequencies of understanding, of interacting, of effectiveness. And it can change our lives tremendously, literally almost instantaneously at this point in history. Things are moving in a way that they have never moved before, at least not in 2,500 years. And I understand some people who, can remember their past lives. They might remember the last time that it was this exciting. Right. But for most of us, we were sort of born into this mechanistic, three-dimensional, very cause and effect type of universe. And there is a quantum shift going on. We are actually all becoming aware of our eternal light substance and how we may, through our thinking, feeling, and acting, move that light substance to create a better life, a better world for ourselves in the here and now.
Wow. All right, I think maybe now we'll go to the second Lessia set. That's a beautiful place to take a break, and it really, obviously, will fit in with what Lessia is going to sing. So she's going to do Oh Happy Day and Lottery, and they're both written by Lessia and myself. And Lessia is going to perform them, and they're both from the new CD, Lessia Bridging Heaven and Earth.
Oh, happy day, no more painful wars to fight us. Oh, happy days, new millennium. Oh, happy day with spirit that guide us. Oh, happy day, we can finally live as one. We've been lost in our illusions. We were brainwashed from the start. We've been captured by contradictions that confuse a gentle heart. We've been pieces of a puzzle with a picture so unclear. We could never make much sense of how to love or what to feel. But I believe we can do it. I think we stand a chance. It just takes a bit of knowing it's like learning how to dance. Since we are the world, we can change the world. Watch the chosen numbers race across your TV screen with hopes of very high. Well, now you just might own your dream. Well, you've been bent on tomorrow, trading in the day. There's magic in your life, but you let it slip away. When you've already won the birds and the bees, you've already won all those flowers and trees. You've already won all that you need. You think that with a perfect friend you're gonna never get the blues. That elusive angel soulmate, Mr. Right's out there for you. But there's love and laughter already in your heart. You've held the winning ticket, honey, from the very start. And you've already won the moon in the sky. You've already won a friend stopping by. You've already won all that you need. Oh, yeah. So stop with your complaining. It's not a class that's gonna do it. And anyway, all that stuff you've been looking for, well, it's right there inside of you. And if you can value every sunrise someday, you're gonna say how lucky you really are, 'cause all the best things come free. And you've already won, you smiling at me. You've already won such a sweet lottery. You've already won all that you need, all that you need, all that you need, all that you need. All that you need.
So, I mean, how does your life's work, lead you and lead you to lead other people into the experience that we really have already won? We think that we have this disability or this way of doing it, and yet actually we have everything we need.
Well, I guess a lot of times I find myself simply pointing out what is individual and personal and what is more a part of the larger pattern that we are within, where we're getting beyond the need to blame for acting correctly or not acting correctly, that we start understanding that we are all part of a larger complex, you might say, of life activities. Sometimes it's a good time for thinking. Other times it's a good time for doing. Other times it's a good time for feeling. And sometimes when we're having a hard time, surprise, it's not our fault. There's a storm going on. We cannot take responsibility for the storm. What we can do is take responsibility for how we are within that storm. And again, a lot of times I find that when people are going through a hard time, it is partially the effects of their own causes, but sometimes it's more just a crucial point of decision where the minute that they take that leap into faith, into power, into understanding, everything else in their life changes. And I can't say it always changes for the better, because from the standpoint of the old, it might not look better. But by the time you get to the end of the process of change, you find out that what you were going through wasn't that scary after all. It really wasn't as disastrous as you thought it would be. The fact that it was difficult and isn't difficult should provide a sense of relief through going through the experience and coming out of it with wisdom and understanding about what was yours, what wasn't yours, what you could do and what you couldn't do. And that's really a lot of what I believe my work is pointing out the possibilities, the better possibilities of what a person can do or feel or think or aspire toward in the moment, given who they are and the general conditions. Because sometimes it's a great time for everybody. Other times it's a lousy time for everybody. Okay? And then the trick, of course, is to bring forth the best one can in the midst of the limiting conditions, so that by the time the limiting conditions cease, then you've got full momentum into your truth of being. And that's the real blessing of astrology. Again, a lot of times people give Mercury Retrograde a very bad rap. Well, we can't do anything. We're not allowed to sign any papers. Everything's going to break down. This is nonsense. Things break down inside of Mercury Retrograde periods and outside. You know, contracts fail inside of Mercury Retrograde times and outside. So really, we are moving within the experience of time. And that time is our way of measuring our experience. All that astrology does is show us the points of time, symbolically what they mean. You might say the different pulses of life, the pulse of the expansive principle, the pulse of the duty and responsibility principle within us, the pulse of the enlightenment principle, the pulse of the nurturing principle. Sometimes we're breathing in, sometimes we're breathing out. I think the trick is to not get clutching in fear around the betweens. And that's a lot of where people come to me, you know, as they say, well, should I marry or not marry? And usually I say, the question is, by this point in time, you will know whether you should marry or not. The trick is to examine oneself and one's process between the question and a point in time when the answers will logically put themselves forward as a result of one's own mindset and experience and heart space. And you find often with astrology, the most accurate predictions are the ones that are made in terms of what experience will happen at a given time. And for example, where the generic storms are coming in, and if you don't lose your head during those generic storms, maybe you won't screw up the relationship, because you will know that it's a general tension that's in the air, and it's nothing personal, and therefore you don't have to respond in a personal manner. You may be feeling agitated, the other person may be feeling agitated, but that doesn't mean you have to act on the agitation. The gift of
you
astrology,
have a recognition that there's just agitation around.
Yeah,
You're in a
know,
washing machine.
Yeah, and you know the time span to be on the alert for that. Just like sometimes the greatest success comes from striking at the exact right moment. Again, I came to astrology years ago because I had a question. Why do things happen when they do? Why not yesterday? Why not tomorrow? And it led me into a study of cycles, sunspot cycles, economic cycles, you know, earthquake cycles, all this stuff. Well, that eventually led me into astrology. So I could begin to put together how timing affects life and how life affects timing. And what one astrologer misses, another catches. Not all astrologers by any means have the same level or understanding of knowledge any more than a physician would or an attorney would. So the fact that somebody may have gone to an astrologer and not gotten a very accurate reading doesn't invalidate astrology. It's like sun sign astrology in the newspapers. Some of those are accurate, some of them aren't. A lot of times, that is strictly commercial writing, not done by real astrologers.
Well, it's two sentences, so it'd be hard to...
Right. It's very generic.
Right.
That's why it's always
and
good.
I mean, would you say that astrology, as you said earlier, leads to tendencies, right? I mean, that...
Exactly.
So would you say that at a certain point someone would almost transcend their tendencies? Is that a possibility, would you say, for a human being? Or?
You fulfill tendencies. The trick of life, I believe, is through a simple self-control at crucial moments to bring forth the better angels of our nature rather than the negative habitual tendencies that we might have learned as children or through our circumstances and through some of the hard experiences that life can give us. And with astrology, you can look at anything, past, present, or future, and understand what it was teaching you, what the trends were going on around that, what it was challenging within you, what was the cause and effect cycle around it, and what you could do best to resolve and bring forth the better part of you out of that challenging experience. And it's just like the same thing with harmonious experiences. Astrology can help you not go to sleep and be lulled into a false sense of security, but instead it can show you when to build and when to release, when to receive and when to give appropriately. And again, a lot of the success of life, I believe, is in making sense of what you can do for the best in the moment with what you have. And this is where astrology is a great gift. And readings are personal, but for example, I've also done readings on businesses. I've done sessions for people with compatibility, for example, for marriage. Also, when is the best time, for example, for launching a business or launching a marriage. You can have charts done for babies, and you can automatically see what their tendencies are, whether or not they're, for example, more inclined toward law, or for medicine, or for finance, or for real estate, or for children and creativity in the arts. And all of these things can be seen in a natal birth chart. So I definitely believe everybody could learn a lot from astrology. Whether they sit down with a professional astrologer or not, I believe everybody should learn something about their vintage. It might help make sense of this incredibly magical, multi-level light existence that we are all living. In that sense, there is a great tide of evolution that goes on despite all of our individual separations. And we are collectively on a path of return to the wisdom of the oneness that we all are together. And for the most part, we are learning what roles we can play in this upcoming 20-year transitional era. A lot of what's upsetting people right now is because we have hit the end of an old era of thinking, of perceiving. We've moved out of a mechanistic universe into a quantum physics universe, into an information age. We're beginning to remember electromagnetic light substance. We're changing our approach to matter and space and time and energy in each other. And we are really on a path of return collectively. This is the first time, there are configurations going on right now for the first time in 2,500 years. The last time this happened was the greatest flowering of wisdom in the history of the planet and formed the foundation for all the major religions on Earth. Now it's happening again, but I believe it's on a collective level. We are collectively rediscovering our true nature, which is energy, vibration, and light substance. I mean, everything that we can see here is different frequencies of light substance. And astrology shows us the unique timing when all of these frequencies were set into motion for us, as well as for those that we like, those that we don't like, our businesses. And again, sometimes the timing on things is all that you need to make a good idea fly excellently. And sometimes, if you simply wait a little while before you do it, you save yourself a lot of headache and heartbreak. You know, mostly we've gotten into this Western mindset that we can do anything we want to do whenever we want to do it if we just set our minds to it. That's not true. There are natural limitations in this world. It doesn't mean that we can't do some things, but a lot of times the success or the failure is entirely dependent upon our timing. If you think about it, you go up to a certain person that you might want to have a date with. You ask them in the right way at the right time, you get a successful outcome. You ask them in the wrong timing, you're going to get an unsuccessful outcome as far as you're concerned. So it may not even be so much that you're wrong or they're wrong or it's wrong, but sometimes the timing is not exactly precise. You get the precise timing, you usually get a precise result. And even quantum physics would agree with that particular statement. Again, it's a very exciting time of the convergence of art and science and culture and spirituality, and we're seeing how all of the sciences and the arts and the philosophies and religions are all finding ways of sort of verifying each other's approach to the one consciousness life that transcends all of our individual differences. That's my fundamental approach to astrology. Is I believe every one of us has phenomenal gifts, and if we just learn what they are and we can focus on them, then we bring forth a better life, and we can know when our challenging times are going to be, and we can know what challenging energies are inside of us, and therefore what we tend to attract to us in the external world, and we can know when these challenges come up, how to play them so that we don't lose our internal equilibrium, so we don't do and say things that are inappropriate or would create future karmas of a negative nature. Because all the karma is the cycle of cause and effect. That's all astrology is it shows us the stages of the greater cause and effect cycle. That's why everybody can profit from learning anything that they can possibly learn about this. Of course, there is no substitute for going to an astrologer, just like there would be no substitute for going to an attorney. If you needed legal advice, you couldn't get it out of your newspaper column with the same accuracy that you would by going to an attorney. Or ask the doctor in the newspaper would be different than going to your personal physician or your holistic health practitioner or your acupuncturist, for example. Because the theory of something and the practice of something is entirely different. And again, there are different levels of expertise on every single thing. And so I believe that being as wide open as the future really is for all of us, though we've all recently been through an extraordinarily challenging time. Each one of us had a different challenging time based on where certain things fell in our charts. But for example, we all recently went through a very challenging period. And it was teaching us all to strengthen our hearts, to free ourselves from an old rigidity. It was helping us break up old sensitivities and set patterns. For example, we're all being called to a new form of fulfillment. If we follow some of our recent disappointments, we will find we've added a new heart strength and a new vision, because we've all been challenged to manage our feelings on a social or interpersonal level. Every single person is going through this right now. For example, a lot of relationships have been under great tension these last few years. It's because certain configurations have been inclining us all toward understanding our self-sufficiency. So those of us that have been moving toward a greater self-sufficiency have been in line with the greater pattern. Those who have been resisting the self-sufficiency and playing to dependencies and rigidities have been in stress. We've been having a hard time with that.
We're swimming upstream.
Exactly. And astrology can show us really how we don't have to fight the current of things. It can show us when it's time to chill out, when it's time to study, when it's time to relax and play, when it's time to overcome some old set patterns and not cling to the old patterns. Because let's face it, when we're exhaling, we're not worried about where the next breath is coming from. Well, sometimes we have to let go of old ideas and old approaches and old relationships. And that's when we sometimes fear, we get caught in uncertainty, we start going to external people hoping that the reality will be more real, when in fact, for example, a good astrologer could say, okay, well, you're going to be going through an uncertain period for the next 10 weeks, and if you focus on this, and you study about that, and you try to foster that particular approach, and you downplay this other approach, you will find yourself at the end of this process understanding more, being more comfortable with yourself and what is coming to be and what is beginning to leave. Because life is a game of giving and receiving of ideas and feelings and things. And often if we just know when to let go of the fistful of pennies, we get the handful of $100 bills. If we know how to let go of the old patterns of anger and frustration and clutching and what if it should fail, and if I leave this person, I'll be alone for the rest of my life. And we can know to sit with our heart and our soul and our self-knowledge and know that if we do that and we live our integrity, that at a certain point in time, we will attract the right job, the right mate, the right understanding, the right friends. Then we can take more of a broad view of our existence, and we don't have to be fearing.
Right, we can live without fear, or a lot less fear.
And that is the approach I take in my readings, is that really there's no point in fearing any of the changes. It's all a question of finding the right point of view. If you identify with something too heavily, it's going to change, because this is a transitional existence. I mean, all forms do pass away. And if you know for a fact that the golden rule works, that what goes around comes around, then you don't have to be too attached to the negative, because you can keep generating the positive, knowing that in the future, in exactly the right time and season, it will fulfill itself according to the truth of your being. And that's why, truly, love is the way. Because it's not that everything is likable to us, but if we greet our challenges with love, and if we greet our need to act with love, if we greet our sorrow with love and our joy with love, at some point we will look back and all we will have had are loving experiences.
Yeah, every moment will be filled with love. So,
exactly.
Right.
And it's not even that takes away our real world practical common sense, but it's just we can work with our common sense and our practicality coming from a space of love, coming from a space of openness to the new, to the changing, fantastic magic of life. And I do bring out the magic of life, what we can do to bring the magic of our life.
to experience the joy of living.
Exactly. And I believe a lot of it deals with perception. That's why I did the Mercury Retrograde book, so that we can understand the nature of perception, the nature of the magic in our life, the nature of the part of us that guides us to our soul's function, that we may bring it out into our world. And to me, that's the greatest blessing of astrology. You know, not that the stars are making this happen, or that because this is such that you're going to be wealthy or successful. Though you can see all of these things. That's almost like the sideshow.
Right.
The
The root is love. The root is the connection. The root is...
Yeah, and that our physical cycles, if we meet the challenges with love, if we meet the harmony with love. Our emotional cycles, we meet the challenges with love, we meet the harmony with love. Our mental challenges, our mental understandings, we meet it with love. Eventually, we will integrate our personalities
And move in love.
and move in love as a pure expression of a soulful existence.
Yeah, I think that's it. So, well, we've done it again. The show, we've reached the end of the show. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of information. Obviously, you know, Robert lives on fire, and Lessia was just extraordinary. So, again, in words and music, it's all there. It's all the same love. It's that fire. It's that love. We need to experience that love. We want to come into that love. And whatever you're doing in that life, in your life, that feeds it, that feeds that experience of love, that feeds that experience of truth, just cherish it, nurture it, love it, move in it, come home to it. And if we can help in any way, that's what we're here to do. So good night. Thank you. God bless you. Come again. We love you, and thanks for all your input. Good night.